The Taunka'le of Northrend are cousins of the modern Tauren and Yongo and share a common origin. 12,200 years ago, the migrating Yongo of ancient Kalimdor were enslaved and twisted by the Mulgu and their magic, losing much of their previous druidic culture in the process. After fighting and freeing themselves during the Pandaren Revolution, these ancient Yongo could not agree upon a unified direction for their people and became fractured. While some, the ancestors of the modern Yongo, stayed in Pandaria, many others, who took the name Tauren, chose to migrate back north to central Kalimdor, rediscovering their ancient culture and their connection with Cenarius. Others still, described as the most nomadic tribes, migrated further north, stopping only when they reached the land surrounding the Storm Peaks, the future continent of Northrend, where they were gradually transformed by the Titan-forged machinery there and became known as the Taunka'le. In spite of this, all of these cultures maintained some limited ties with one another until these were cut, for the most part, by the Sundering. In spite of this, modern Tunka'le and Tauren, for instance, have no issues recognizing the kinship between their races, and their languages are similar enough, at least, to probably be mutually intelligible. As a result, when the Horde Warsong offensive arrived in Northrend and came into contact with the Tunka'le, they sent a Tauren ambassador, emissary Brighthoof, to establish ties and assist them in their flight from the Scourge. In fact, she proved instrumental in providing hope for the Tunka'le refugees, who even came to think of her as their village elder, facilitating their joining the Horde. Unlike the Tauren and many other races in the Horde, the Tunka'le do not practice the traditional form of shamanism, which involves a willing give-and-take relationship with the elemental spirits. Instead, the Tunka'le have taken to forcing the elements to bend to their will, which is partly what has ensured their survival in the harsh lands of Northrend. It's presumed, though unconfirmed, that the Tunka'le do so in the same way as dark shamans do, by using decay, an element opposite of the harmonizing spirit, or chi, representing life energy, which is instead more so analogous and associated with death. However, in addition to this, the Tunka'le also periodically physically attack and kill the elementals of their surrounding region in order to temporarily reduce their overall influence. The Tunka'le, unlike more typical shamans, also regularly force the elements to do apparently banal tasks, such as maintaining fires or making them turn windmills, which are nevertheless important in the harsh environment they live in, but other shamans, even those living in similar conditions, would do so much more sparingly. It's worth noting that there is a Tunka'le member of the Earthen Ring, Toshe Chaos Render, though not much is known about him other than the fact that he is more rough around the edges and aggressive than many of his colleagues. The Tunka'le, as is to be expected, do share certain cultural similarities with the Tauren of Kalimdor, in spite of the millennia of separation between the two races. For one, in spite of their radically different approaches to shamanism, both the Tauren and the Tunka'le practice ancestor worship, and both perform certain religious rites at funerals. Also, although the Tunka'le are certainly more rough around the edges, they have also been described as, quote, normally peaceful. For instance, a war 4,500 years ago between them and the Force Nymphs, caused by the corruption of the world tree Andrasil, was unusual enough to draw the attention of the Cenarian Circle. To quote the Tunka'le Akayak, "Why would we fight? Tunka'le know what it is to struggle each day against death." Their culture also includes fortune-telling ceremonies using the feathers of imperial eagles, and it's possible, though unlikely, depending on how you interpret a certain line, that they practice arranged marriages. In addition, perhaps oddly, unlike the Tauren before they joined the Horde and settled down in Furthenbluff, the Tunka'le, at least in Northrend, are already united among themselves. Until recently, they've had a capital of all the Tunka'le, Ice Mist Village in the Dragonblight, and the various camps scattered throughout the continent have kept in communication with one another. In fact, as the threat of the Scourge grew greater, certain camps chose to evacuate and move to safer settlements such as in Grizzly Hills. Perhaps an exception to this rule are the Mistcorn Tunka'le, which appear on island expeditions. Judging by their leader's title, Kakota the Exiled, and their death quotes including, quote, Goodbye, beloved Tundra. It seems probable that this group of Tunka'le was exiled for an unknown reason from the Borean tundra, with their hostility to the Horde also indicating that they are no longer affiliated at all with the main Tunka'le camps. A notable Tunka'le duo is a kayak and, to use a somewhat improper yet accurate term, his fiancée Bonik. One day, Bonik disappeared while searching the wastes of Northrend, looking for a relic to prove herself worthy of a kayak. As her mate went to search for her, he instead found the undead Tauren Trag High Mountain. A kayak then took Trag to his village, Taunka'le, where, much to the undead's surprise, he was welcomed with open arms. The following day, the two left again to search for Bonik, only to find her corpse impaled by the spear of a Magnetor. As they returned home, they found Tunka'le under attack by undead Nerubians. Trag saved the village by jumping down into the Nerubian pit and collapsing it from within, though with no way back, only forward, he eventually reached Icecrown Citadel itself. Later, following his confrontation with the Lich King, Trag was once again found by a kayak and a group of Tunka'le and taken to live with them in Tunka'le. As for Bonik, her spirit appeared before Kalecgos and later Jaina Proudmoore when the former was investigating the history of Galakrond, where she helped guide them. Jaina speculated that Bonik's ghost was actually the Titanic Watcher Tyr in disguise, but this came long before we knew that Tyr had died long ago in the Tirsfall Glades. The connection is still there during the events of Legion, as Bonik appears to Paladin adventurers under the guise of the, quote, friendly Tunka'le spirit to guide them in obtaining the Spark of Tyr. Hundreds of years ago, the Storm Peaks were ruled by a cruel air elemental named the North Wind, who subjugated its residents. The Tunka'le of Camp Tunka'lo, however, revolted against the Northwind and its servants. Their champion, Stormhoof, brother of Chieftain Swiftspear, then faced the Northwind in personal combat and weakened it before he died. Over the centuries, as it slowly regained strength, the Northwind altered the timeline of the events to ensure its continued rule. Stormhoof was thus turned from a liberating hero to an insurrectionist executed for his, quote, crimes. This went so far that even the memories of the spirits of the ancient Tunka'le were altered to fit this timeline. Eventually, a watcher of the Bronze Dragonflight, the ancient Tauren Zarantar the Witness, arrived in Camp Tunka'lo and noticed the interference. After investigating, Zarantar set the timeline in its proper place by having an adventurer travel back in time and assume the role of Stormhoof. As before, Stormhoof faced the Northwind in battle and weakened it while dying himself, only this time he used an artifact of the Northwind, the Horn of Elemental Fury, to completely destroy it. Perhaps oddly, a variation of the story of Stormhoof and the Northwind made its way to the Tunka'le of the Borean Tundra. According to their folklore, Stormhoof did not fight the Northwind to end its tyranny, but rather because he sought the Horn of Elemental Fury, a supposedly legendary artifact in this story. After 5 days of struggle, the injured Stormhoof took the horn and returned to his village on the 6th day, only to be slaughtered by the lesser elemental minions of the Northwind on his way. The Northwind then broke the horn into 2 pieces, gave them to 2 Gorlock chieftains as tokens of their authority, and, according to a later addendum to the story, instructed them to pass on these relics to their descendants. The 2 pieces of the horn were indeed in the hands of 2 Gorlock chieftains in modern times, and the artifact was reassembled and used to end an undead Nerubian attack on Taunka'le village by collapsing their tunnels.